How's it going, guys? I think a minute in is good enough to start because this one's only a 30-minute webinar and I want to show you guys some cool stuff. How's it going, everybody? I'm Ricky Cecchini, the VP of Product at CloudRadial, and this is ticketing and the customer experience you want, specifically as it relates to ticketing, of course. And we're going to be talking about um, not just the theory of ticketing, because obviously everybody here knows what ticketing is, but how we approach it, where we've seen people tackle it successfully, unsuccessfully, talking about the pitfalls, talking about what features actually make it very useful, what's worth your time, and what is bonus stuff you can get to when you have time. So I try to be very, very honest in these webinars because, again, I'm not coming at this with pie in the sky. You might do this. I'm telling you what we've seen across thousands of MSPs. So hopefully it makes it a little bit more worth it than some guy blabbing on screen. So let's get started. So first and foremost, what are we covering? We are covering the basis of why we do what we do, and that is the two-sided ticketing frustration. We'll get to that in a second, but the two sides exist on your side and on the client side. Both people are frustrated by the general concept of ticketing. We'll see why in a moment. We're going to get to the base levels of ticketing, and the base levels is what does it take to go from I have submitted a ticket all the way to what makes an exceptional client experience, and how can that even be? How can you get a good exceptional client experience out of ticketing in general? Step three will be what I generally speak in Southern fancy terms of getting fancy with your tickets. And what that really means is how to include self-service, client empowerment, how to take something from I submitted a problem all the way to that's much better than just sending in an email. And then number four, which is probably the only thing that really matters here, is how do you make this thing work? Because nobody likes setting up systems that don't actually do anything or they don't get used. So we're going to talk about how to get that going because that is the ROI of this whole thing. So if you are just here and you have not seen CloudRadial UCP, aka Unified Client Portal, I'm going to show that today, or at least the ticketing focused portion of that. If you've never heard of us and you decided to sign up for a random webinar, what? I love that for you. But in case you don't know, we are a platform that focuses on MSP client really delivery. So what we do is we help out with MSPs trying to unify that service delivery, trying to bring that good service delivery, mesh it with their stack to the client in various ways. And again, today we're specifically talking about ticketing, which is one of our probably most popular use cases. A lot of times, if people come to the Unified Client Portal and they're looking for something, they generally have this concept of my clients are asking for some kind of interface. The current interface I either have or thinking about isn't really that good. I'm looking for something that can wow them and give them more than tickets, but also starting with tickets because that's how most people view client relationships, at least initially. So let me pull up a timer so I don't go over because I will go over. This is my real talk as you see me struggle on a webinar in real time. This is real, guys. I promised you real. This is real. Here we go. So first and foremost, I found a ChatGPT image and I said, guy pulling out his hair and it made him bald. I thought that was a cool choice. Anyways, ticket frustration for all people. Internally, where do we see the frustrations? We see frustrations for people in that tickets are a time suck. Now, I'm not saying that tickets are useless or we don't want tickets because obviously a lot of relationships are built on the ticketing angle. But what we see is they take away from people internally, again, in the MSP, doing projects, potentially upselling, growing careers. We're seeing a bigger and bigger shift of people wanting to tackle specializations as far as technicians go. And again, that specialization anywhere from like AI, cloud, project management, whatever. And the traditional boring help desk ticket is really just like an annoying fly to that. Externally, aka to your clients, tickets are what they slow, or rather, what slow people down. So what that means is that same concept applies to your client, right? Your client is trying to do their job. If they're an accountant, they're in the middle of filing, they're in the middle of doing stuff, they have deadlines, they have their boss breathing down their neck. So fundamentally, a ticket is nothing more than, again, an annoying fly that gets in their way. It takes their projects away. They're selling, they're growing their careers, doing their stuff. So in general, we have to be cognizant that ticketing as it relates to support ticketing and not necessarily project management or selling services is really annoying. So what do people actually want? How do we approach it? Whatever. This is something I'm going to bring up something that is ancient in CloudRadial history, but it is very relevant, which is MTTT versus MTTR. I believe our CEO used to do webinars about this like 6 years ago, is as long as this has been around. MTTT is mean time to ticket, aka how fast can you put in a ticket? MTT, that should say R, is mean time to resolution. How fast can you solve a ticket? So again, this is the unfortunate truth. And again, we're speaking in truths here. The fastest ticket submission is what people correlate to the best service. Meaning, again, the faster it's off my plate, it's on your plate. I don't have to think about it. I can get back to what I want to do. In theory, this is the usual client logic. The reality is, and we know this, is the faster something is fired, typically, it's not always true, varies from user to user, but the faster something is fired, the higher the likelihood of mistakes, missed stuff, whatever, it takes longer. A good example of this is, again, if you just run into a restaurant and scream, I want a hamburger, that's really good. That's really fast. But then you go, okay, what type? How do you want it cooked? What do you want on it? What do you not want on it? There's so many things that turn that interaction into something really, really slow, even though it felt really good to just scream out in the void. That's phone calls, that's emails. So what people actually want ideally is no tickets whatsoever, which, as an industry, we want to move towards that future. But really, it's the fastest resolution around. And the logic is, again, the better information you give on the first pass, the quicker the thing can be handled. Everyone holds hands, sings Kumbaya, and the world works. Here's the problem coming from the vendor that offers the solution. Putting in a ticket in a form sucks because it takes more time out of the user's day, right? So you've got a lose-lose fundamentally. You've got, on one hand, you've got the problem of shooting out an email or sending a phone call isn't really effective. The putting in the form gets you all the answers, but it takes time out of their day. So realistically, we know this is the right answer. However, we have to make it palatable. So the difference between your mentality as you approach ticketing as a whole is not to go about it by just saying we now have a form that submits a ticket, but it's about the accoutrements, it's about the sides, it's about the experience that you put around that thing to make that submission worth it, which is why CloudRadial UCP doesn't just do tickets. And I would urge that just a standalone ticketing portal will not solve the fundamental problem, because the problem isn't tickets in a form are bad, it's that they take away from the end user. So for today, we are going to talk about the secret and the best bits of ticketing, which is exactly pretty much the simplest thing, which is putting them where they can get to them, empowering them, having them do more than just putting them in a form. And again, you'll see the kind of different levels of CloudRadial UCP ticketing, and hopefully you take away some cool stuff that you can do or think about for yourself too. So without further ado, because I hate PowerPoints, we're just going to go straight to the ticketing demonstration. I'll flash this on screen later as well, but just in case I forget, and just in case you're not familiar with the CloudRadial stuff, you can always get a demo of CloudRadial UCP or any of the other products in our lineup at cloudradial.com/demo. But that's my pitch. Let's get straight into the business. All right, Crystal, ghost me. I don't think they want to see my face. Let's talk about tickets. Okay, so when we talk about ticketing in CloudRadial UCP, again, this is not a CloudRadial UCP master demo. We are specifically talking about the ticketing portion. So what really matters to us is that somebody that you support is empowered to get their answers in the right way. So let's just cover the basics of how CloudRadial works, the UCP works, because that is the fundamental speed up of the tickets. So again, we're familiar with tickets coming in from emails and phone calls, and they generally make their way to a support queue or some kind of a triage, and somebody gets them and moves on. In our case, what we're doing is we're building catalogs within the portal. So the idea is that, kind of like my crappy example of the burger, in this case, we are offering a menu system. Why? Because menu systems, first of all, help to organize how you structure your tickets, right? In this case, we're doing a theory of this person's getting supported. We have computer issues, file issues, whatever, and then kind of pick their thing. And then when they click on a specific thing, out comes the form, they fill the form. These forms are connected to your PSA, right? So if you have a PSA system, Halo, Autotask, ConnectWise, Synchro, if it's one of the ones we support, we will send it straight into your PSA system so you can pick it up. Again, if you're not familiar with UCP, this is not something you as an MSP or a technician need to worry about. This is just what do you want to get from them to do the best job. So you can see in the software program issue, you have to strike a fine balance between not making the form a monster and turning your people away, but also not just having a blank box that says submit a ticket. We see a lot of back and forth on this. I've seen some monster forms that don't get filled out but are technically beautiful. I've seen some really, really, really simple forms that are really easy to fill out, but they're fundamentally no better than an email. So again, fine line on what you put in there. Now, these are pretty generic ones, but let's take a look at the gist of the back end here. So when we actually look at what CloudRadial is doing, I usually in these demos, we'll come back to this as well because I do want to show this. I don't cover all the form builder bit because again, the form builder is kind of a form builder and it can ask questions that you probably expect to be there. The main power of ticketing and empowerment for you guys to make the experience really good and make that time to resolution really fast exists in the routing, right? Because again, if it gets to the right team, to the right board, whatever, all your fancy automations and your specialists can actually get to it. So again, in this case, we're connected to ConnectWise. It's going to the right board. It has the right status, the right priority. If you're a stickler about every single bit and you have a lot of different automations or categorizations that you run off of, go nuts, right? Fill out the type and the subtype and the source and the time and whatever. And what that'll do, again, it'll slot it perfectly. So our aim here is to eliminate the kind of back and forth triage stuff to get it exactly where it needs to go. Again, dramatically reducing the time it takes to actually resolve that ticket. And then inherently, if you ask the right questions from the get-go, then you are not having to spend the time back and forth pulling teeth trying to understand what the issue was with the client in the first place. That's fundamentally it. Again, this is a ConnectWise one specifically, but depending on which PSA system you have connected, it would, respectfully match your fields or respectively, wrong word. And if you don't have either of those and you want to experiment, you can also just send it as an email. So even if it's an unsupported system, even if you have something that is not necessarily supported by you, the goal of the portal and why it exists in a bigger picture than just a form engine is again alongside your knowledge base articles, alongside your applications or whatever have you that you have built in the portal. The clients have the context of all the other stuff to fuel their support needs. So again, when I come back into request service report a problem, it's fine to have a lot of these things happen inside of the portal for form-based things. It's another thing when you start putting in fancier things like, hey, check out this article before you submit this ticket, or check out this video, and get into more of that self-service. So I would say kind of the premise of this webinar was let's talk about how CloudRadial UCP's ticketing works. And now let's talk about how we've seen it work really well. So again, form engine is just the beginning and routing is kind of a given. So now what we're looking at is the service request area of CloudRadial. This is probably the most popular single feature inside of the UCP. The reason it's most popular is it is the visual equivalent of the, if we're talking ITIL, this is like incidents and this is again service requests. Now, fundamentally, technically, these do the same thing. And if you have CloudRadial, you can actually choose to disable one or the other, and they would work just fine. So only difference between those forms and these forms, you can see when I click one, guess what? Blade pops up, same, is that these are visual. Visual ones take up more space. Visual ones are not as easy to categorize, which is why there are many of them. There still are categories, and you can certainly sort and filter by them as much as you need. But it's just a different way of offering the same stuff. And traditionally, what we see MSPs do is they put their incidents and their problems in one area, and then they treat the second area here as like a shopping cart or whatever. But you can certainly do the same exact issue reporting. And in fact, I'm going to show some examples. So a good example of why the forms become really critical and the ticketing power becomes really effective is not when you have a ticket that says, what's your problem, and a couple of questions. It's when you have monster forms that need to be formatted nicely. This is probably the single most useful form in the portal, and I'm happy to say, if you don't have CloudRadial, this is something that comes by default. So you actually get all this sample content is launched with your CloudRadial subscription, editable by you, of course. But you can see that like something like this would be like pulling teeth for a lot of MSPs to have to do this via email or phone call because again, getting this information is easily missed. So same exact concept expanded. If we look at the guts of this ticket, what we're really seeing is just a bunch of work put into the form to build out the questions as you like them. But again, as far as it goes to the routing, it goes to the right place. So as far as connecting and making sure the forms are good, that's awesome. We have that in here. Let's talk about how we empower people to make them want to use this and not just be a fancy form tool. So one of the first things we get into is self-service. And this is something that MSPs are really big on because we go from the ability to submit a ticket in a cool place that is surrounded by other resources. Awesome, we got it. Self-service gets into, like, for example, let's take the scan snap not working. Can I actually help people troubleshoot and get answers out of the way? Obviously, that would be great because if I can do that, then you are no longer fielding this ticket. They can get back to work faster. Kumbaya. Again, we love that. How does that work? Well, I built this ticket right before the webinar as an example. It's a super, super simple ticket, right? Printer category, my ScanSnap scanner is not working. Not to throw shade at ScanSnap. I just used to see this all the time when I was a tech. So like when I say self-service, what can we do? There are two primary mechanisms that I've seen implemented in the wild of CloudRadial that work really well. Number one is trying to cut off tickets at the pass. So you're offering this great menu system. People are much clearer about where they can go to submit and kind of figure out where their tickets are living, so what they can pick from. Introducing self-service either exists within the body of the ticket, which we're going to do an example of shortly, or there's also a spot to do it in the confirmation. And we'll get to this later. And this is going to be post-submission. So we'll talk about the entire workflow. When we have this ticket right here, again, I'll get out of the guts of it. It's a really, really simple ticket. Which model ticket or scanner do you have? What are if you have any additional comments? What I want to do is I want to inject some kind of a self-service. So when they click on their IX500 model, they get some assistance for that model. How do I do that? Again, what I've seen a lot of MSPs do is they'll go find, say, a YouTube video. Hey, look at that. I already had it pulled up. How to clean the document scanner, right? Maybe this is related to the majority of troubleshooting issues, and this video is pretty much my go-to. So what am I going to do? I am going to take this URL, like literally right click, copy that boy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into here and explore my options within the form. So again, when it comes to actually implementing self-service, I'm going to throw an additional question in there. Now, like I said, I don't necessarily want to do a demo of all the question types because a lot of them are like checkboxes and dates and stuff. But CloudRadial goes above and beyond, right? We've got some more interesting things like if they want to override and you want to give them the ability to override the priority or the type, or you want to do numbers, you know? In this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing an HTML form. So why am I doing this? What I'm going to ultimately do is I'm going to inject something visual inside of the form between these two steps. I already took the liberty on the right-hand side of my screen that you guys cannot see to just pull up a simple frame code that takes that exact URL and embeds it in here. So check this out. I'm going to take that, put it in here, and I'm doing this on purpose. I'll come back to it because I will purposely mess this up. I hit submit. So what did I do? I put a YouTube video directly inside here. So when they click on it, before they submit the ticket, they have a video right there. That's okay. That's pretty good. That has accomplished the fact that it's now able to self-service to a degree. I can make it a little fancier, and this is what people see, what we see with people as they advance their UCP form building. The real trick to building forms that are helpful, sexy, people like filling them out because they're really efficient, is to not just overload everybody with information. So in this example, it only applies to one of my thing. Maybe it doesn't apply to Office Scanner. It doesn't apply to other. It only applies to this one. So top tip is to make your forms approachable. If they look disgusting and long, people don't want to do them, and that's another reason they won't. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll go back to that HTML form, and I'm actually going to hide it until somebody answers the question. I want to do the desk scanner IX500. So what I'm doing here is I've hidden it. You can see a little hidden eyeball. I'm saying hide that thing until they select that. And then what does that do exactly? Let's take a gander. So now I've made it so it is a cleaner form that a self-service in action looks like somebody goes to submit a ticket, they get this, and boom, they go, by the way, right? You can always add more text saying try this first or whatever. This is a very tangible example of how I see self-service implemented in a lot of places. It's very gentle self-service, meaning that there's no gate, there's no forcing the user to watch the video before they do it. You can set up mechanisms to do that within the form, like having people say, yes, I've watched this video before I submit the ticket and check boxes. But we're speaking in truths, meaning that if you gate your user's ability to use your technology and submit a ticket, you are being a little bit too abrasive and people back out, right? So the goal with self-service is to put it there. If it can stop 10, 20, 30% of tickets, you are batting 1,000. That's awesome for the scan snap stuff specifically. But if not, again, you've built a rich resource. Now, why do people like to do this? Because again, it can potentially block off tickets. Some MSPs don't necessarily like doing this because if they do it, they may not get credit for that ticket. So they want to know when tickets are done and completed. So what's the alternative? The alternative is, again, check this out. If I do this, fix this, right? I have watched the video. It didn't help. It didn't do anything for me. I'm going to submit it. And now this is going to submit the ticket over to ConnectWise anyways. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, if you are one of the people that likes to offer post-ticket self-service, so like what if I want to get credit for the ticket going through and maybe I want them to potentially have the ability to fix their own ticket, we're going to edit this and same in the confirmation. So if I did the same embed code in that confirmation, let me grab that code one more time. This should do me. Let's double check. Ta-da. What does that accomplish? That makes it so the experience is now, if I go to scan snap not working, I'm going to purposely pick like office scanner test. When I submit the ticket, I immediately get the ticket submission. And instead of saying, please watch this video, let me gate your thing, let me make your form submission experience even longer, I say, we're on it, but by the way, here's what we're following. And this is another way to get that self-service. Now, this brings me to another big positive and helpful thing to making your ticket submission process go through a portal, specifically the UCP portal, but hey, I'm sure you could figure out how to do this in your own as well. Self-service is just that, right? We want people to have the resources available to solve their tickets, whether they originate from, again, within our portal, which we could have linked off to as well, or from third-party sources like I just did from YouTube. In either case, as a user, I can go see my tickets. And this is another really big benefit to the portal. Because I'm connected to your PSA, because I have everything I need to know, the user and the history and all that stuff, what I'm now doing is I'm able to go into that ticket and identify it, right? Here's my scan snapper not working, whatever, ta-da, with my comment and everything else. And then when I come in as a user, I can keep going and give additional comments. This will go back into the comments inside of the PSA. So again, a technician will see this conversation happening. The user gets a nice experience, but the power of the portal here is that the user doesn't lose track of the ticket. The user, again, can keep adding comments. They don't lose the threads. They can come in and do stuff like, hey, maybe I want to increase the priority. Maybe I want to close the ticket because it helped. And I want to say, hey, I watched that video. It's done. And because what the real mechanism that we're doing here is we're bouncing statuses off your PSA, I can choose in CloudRadial to give perhaps admin level users the ability to close tickets or to escalate tickets, and end users, maybe I don't want them having any of that stuff. So you can see that the power of self-service is not just in chucking resources and videos and articles at people, it's empowering self-service to act on their tickets. So in a big recap here, if you can kind of swallow this model, the idea is that we've gone from I sent an email and that's really fast, which it is, to I've filled out a form. Yeah, it took minutes more, maybe 10 minutes longer than it would have to send an email. However, I see the entire history. The technician sees it. I get confirmation that the ticket was received. I know when you guys are working on it as MSPs. I can take actions on it. I can comment. I can close. I can do whatever I want. And I have control. So basically, one is really fast, zero control, and the other one is full control whenever I want, however I want. That's self-service. So don't be fooled into thinking self-service is just chucking resources. It's the client experience around ticketing that really makes the self-service part. Other honorable mentions of how people take the ticketing experience and make it worthwhile is you don't just want one or two forms that do that. You want to build a thoughtful catalog. You don't need 50,000 tickets. Honestly, this amount that we have right here is pretty good. This is what, 18, I believe. And what this is doing is you've got the standard support tickets, you've got the onboarding forms, you've got stuff like integrations with like TimeZest. This is a really common one that we bring up all the time because you don't have to necessarily stick to the support realm. Say you have something that you want to meet with an account manager, right? TimeZest is a scheduling tool. How does that work with us? Well, in this specific integration, we work with their confirmation numbers with the tickets. So if I put in something saying, I need to speak with an account manager, we're using that same confirmation message to pass the information to TimeZest. And my user experience is that the portal handles my scanner issues. If it's account management stuff, I can submit a ticket. I immediately get the option to set up my meeting right here, and I'm off to the races, right? In this case, I'm my own example. I'm in person with myself. But the example here is to say that like it can go beyond just having this be a ticketing portal. And I urge you to do so because, again, the MSPs that use UCP as kind of a client interface as a whole start to see the benefits leaking into QBRs, into, again, intranet things, right? Using those bookmarks, those applications as their day-to-day. So the key to client adoption is not stopping at a form and not stopping at a YouTube video embed pasted in a form, but really being thoughtful. We're doing a webinar in a few weeks on automation, right? This is just the beginning of what you can do with CloudRadial. If you want the capital S self-service, I would look at something like probably like PIA. So what ends up happening is we integrate with PIA. So if you want the complete closed loop where someone goes in and they don't watch a YouTube video, it actually resets the printer. It actually updates their out of office, whatever, which is a great way to reinforce the portal. You can have those forms from PIA exactly integrated into here. It kicks off the tickets just like it would within CloudRadial. It's embedded in, and it's actually doing all those things. So CloudRadial not only does these self-service things at the very base level, but there are scales. So everything from running our own automation system to reaching out to third-party RPAs. So that way, when you actually have all these things, they trigger and they kick off, and it's the same center of visibility. So that is the real client experience around ticketing. Now, I'll say part of my big example of all of this phrase is how do you get people to do this really? Because what we've seen is offering a portal, having a bunch of value, obviously moves the needle for a lot of people. But the reality is to get people to use these things, if you put a bunch of time and effort, it falls apart if nobody logs in and nobody uses it. And the biggest thing I've learned in the 6 years I've been working at CloudRadial is its accessibility. I had this discussion in the webinar about our training as well. People talked about training inside of the portal. Training is important. Everyone loves training or the idea of training. How do we actually get people to take the training? Surprise, it's not only building cool courses, it's making it available. So CloudRadial is a web portal, but bar none, if you're thinking about doing it, this applies to most of you, if not all of you, the best efficient way to do it is to put it inside Teams. So check this out, right? This is my own actual Teams. When I have the portal running in here, it works really good. So embedding that in there, SSOing, framing it in, working it out means that the same level of support I can get by navigating to my URL is within my workflow. This is the number one secret to making anything work. It doesn't matter what solution you use. It has to be within your client's workflow. If it's out of the workflow, it's just that much more of a barrier. The reason email and phone calls are so popular, is because it's within their workflow. So again, if you put the stuff directly in here, their access to tickets or whatever have you, right in the Teams, whether it's on their phone or in the computer, whatever, you're going to have such an easier time executing on that stuff, which fixes their frustration, but it also fixes yours because you guys internally are getting better tickets, better quality of life, better information, better pizza, Papa John's. But it's a really good thing that, again, has been proven repeatedly by our own customers. And I think Crystal had a couple of questions for me. I know we're pretty much out of time, but I want to answer the few that have come through. So let's pull them up. Okay, great questions. So one of the ones was, can you customize tickets for different users and clients? Absolutely. We're cognizant and fully built to handle that situation where a group of companies may need a different set of tickets than another group of companies. And then even furthermore, maybe one specific company can have a custom catalog. There are systems inside of CloudRadial that are probably too complex to show in 30 seconds, definitely. But we have systems that make it so you do not have to contend with managing a million different forms. So for example, in this content kind of template library, we have packages of service requests. So you can send a package of medically related tickets to medically related clients. You can send stuff that is overridden to have higher permissions. So the system of nuance that you have here in controlling who gets what forms, the management of it is built from the ground up at scale. You don't have to do that if you're just starting off. The easiest thing to start with CloudRadial is use the stock stuff and kind of see what comes through. But if you get fancy, if you have the needs, it is built for customization for sure. Other great question is, how do I establish approval workflows? Which that's another one. Do we have approval workflows? We do. There's actually an entire system of status workflows, which is part of that closed open ticket that I was showing. Can you take me out, Crystal? This text is a little tiny. I want them to see what's going on. Thank you so much. So approval workflows basically means that if we see a status, we can say, show the label approve or deny, and then also have it correspond to a status in your PSA. Approvals and denials is another really useful case because again, a lot of times what people will do is display a ticket like order a laptop, but they'll gate it behind an approval. So again, if you order a laptop, there are plenty of easy mechanisms in here to say, I've sent that out. It's going to send it to either everybody that is an admin in that company or specifically named people. And then again, even showing those tickets only to specific company and user groups. So even that process is, I'll say simple. It's not like a super crazy complex system, but we have that requirement in there that we can actually build out your approval and denial workflows with logging on the ticket itself. One more that came in that was tangentially related, but I'll still answer it because it's a good question. One was, where do I add the tabs on top of the Teams app? So if you're wondering what he's talking about, so in my Teams app, you see that I have the portal, but I also have all these other things. And what this does is it either quickly links me to that area in the portal, or I can link off to third-party stuff, which means I can frame in pretty much whatever, so long as it supports it. So if you are a CloudRadial customer, you are going to go to Partner and Settings. When you go to your Teams app over here, there's a section to add your tabs. And when you add your tabs, again, you can order them whatever way you want to. If you want to do external ones, you can. If you want to do internal ones, you just need this little slash right here, which is great because, again, that means that your client portal can be the launch point, not just to stuff inside of your portal, but if you have like your billing stuff and you want that to turn into whatever, there you go. You're welcome. All right, how many problem options are too many under my computer? That's a fantastic question. Let me tell you that this is something that I've seen a lot of MSPs debate because, again, the usefulness is based off of the patience of your customers and also your patience in building this stuff out. So the question is, if I had network and remote access stuff or office phone, do I want 45 different options under there or will 2 suffice? Yeah, yes. The reality is that it changes. And the real stuff based on research I've seen is that the younger your supported workforce, the more they tolerate options because they prefer picking from a catalog system. Generally, the older and less tech savvy, the fewer options are better. One of the things we're working on, this is not a plug to talk about those other products that we have, but legitimate reason that CloudRadial is moving towards more of chat interfaces and AI interfaces that are taking a lot of your resources, scraping them and serving them up. So you can see that even on my homepage, I have this big search bar in the middle, is because what we see more and more is whether it's an article, whether it's a course, whether it's a catalog of tickets, people are getting more and more used to just asking something to fetch it for them, right? I don't want to read your knowledge base and all 700 articles to find out how to fix my ScanSnap. I want to plug in ScanSnap like an internal Google and have that bring back responses, right? So in my case, I don't even know a good example. I wonder if it did do my ScanSnap. Let's see. I might have indexed it. There you go. ScanSnap. Hey, ScanSnap not working, right? So it goes immediately to show me, hey, we have a ticket for that, right? If I type in printer, it might give me that other printer option. And I'm like, what do we got? Right? Cool. And it also gives them a generic cop out. So if at the very least they're using your portal, we don't want to drive them away saying you didn't fill out the form. So you can even customize a generic, very simple thing to help them submit the ticket. The reason we chose to do this, even though we just talked about, do we do a lot of forms? Because a lot of forms gets a lot of value for you, but they annoy your customers. If they're using the portal and if they're trying, we want to ensure they're rewarded. We want to ensure that they're actually getting benefits of it, which is why we relent a little bit. Again, I wish I could tell you the rule was 2 problem reports, 3 computer tickets, and 2 onboarding forms is the only ones you need. But it's much more complex than that. And the reality is, starting small, offering easy ways to get into it, and making the process very simple is the best way to break into it and building complexity from there. The other death of a lot of this system that I see from a lot of people is trying to perfect something that has not hit the market. And I get it. I've done it before. I'm totally guilty of it. What that means is going into client A and filling out their service catalog and their ticket catalog to be exactly what you think or believe that they want, only for them to not use the portal because something other, whatever happened, right? So It's so much easier and better and more effective. Our most effective partners roll the portal out with a base level of simplicity and wait for the customer to say, "Where's my scan snap form?" And then I'll build it because now I have buy-in. Not only does that get you less labor up front, but that also means that your clients feel like they are working with you. So it's a trick, right? You're literally helping them build the portal up while you are building the portal for yourself. This is part of the big strategy to adoption because, again, if it's not around and available to them, it's not worth it to them. So again, you can see that the big difference and why I harp on it a lot is that, yes, we started this conversation saying email and phone call is easy, but when you consider the alternative, right? Does this add complexity? Yes, man, look at this. This is way more complex than sending an email. But the reality is it's so much more powerful and so much more worth it. So you don't have to necessarily have everything else full power. If you focus your customers on getting used to the ticketing experience, wrapping that around self-service, wrapping that around automation and approvals and whatever, then they see the value in the portal and you can expand out. This is kind of the basis of CloudRadial UCP to getting people to break into the idea of generally collaborating with their MSPs in a shared space like a portal. I think that's all the questions I have right now that I can see, and I'm already 7 minutes over, which I shouldn't do, but I appreciate you guys for sticking around. I only saw like 2 people drop, which is nice. Again, this is not the only session on this subject. In fact, this is kind of the icebreaker because I think Crystal just posted it. Part of the Unified series, we're going to talk about how tickets apply to chat, right? Our own chat, but I'll be talking about how it applies to chat as a whole. Where does that fit into this workflow, this methodology? How this works with automations. We're doing the automation thing with Pia. So we're going to be talking specifically about what CloudRadial automations do, how do they work, and as a sneak preview, we have our own built-in automations that basically can kick off workflows, whether you're adding stuff to the internal planner, you're creating opportunities in your PSA, if supported, you're running Datto quick jobs, you're web hooking to stuff. There are things you can do that make things a lot more interesting than just, here's a YouTube video. And we're going to dive into the nuances of that to really make this thing very powerful. And again, if a client can log into their portal and reset their own password or request something to happen and they see it happening and they have that full visibility, that's really powerful. And that's a much more modern and interesting client experience than not having that. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today. I appreciate it. Yes, Crystal, I saw your comment too. This will be recorded. This will be available if you're watching this after the fact and you have questions. Again, plenty of time to ask them and getting back to you, whether that's if you're an existing client, to your account manager at success@cloudradial.com, or if you have something that you're seeing here that you want a little assistance on, you can always reach out to support@cloudradial.com and we'll help out there. So thank you guys. I will catch you later and have a great rest of your day. And if you need to catch a demo, cloudradial.com/demo. Bye, y'all.